Ford Mustang Mach-E is not known for being one of the most efficient EVs. However, here's a usable trip of mine. 20 minutes city drive, 6 kilometers, and we got single digit efficiency, 9 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. So, one, what does that mean when the car's rated at 20.7 kilowatt hours? And let's discuss this liters per 100 equivalent.
Hi, this is $1 the conversation between gas and EVs. I'm Casey. Now, I've just ticked over 18,000 kilometers and 1 year in the 72 kilowatt hour standard range rear wheel drive Mach-E. I live in Atlantic, Canada. That is this region on the map. Zooming in, Atlantic Canada is talking about primarily Prince Edward Island, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia. Going between PEI and Nova Scotia across the Confederation Bridge is pretty much my 99% usual case scenario for a drive. We did do that with the family in winter, and I had to DC fast charge. I used Electrified Canada on that trip, and it went fairly smoothly, along with some overnight charging at the hotel we were staying at. So that 700 kilometer journey is pretty much my 99% use case for the car. So that's step one, realizing what your worst case scenario is. In my case, it's not necessarily 1,000 kilometer trip. I have taken a much longer trip before. I wasn't blogging back then. We drove our 2021 Ford Escape hybrid, regular hybrid, not plug-in at all, and we still have that car in the driveway. And we went from Prince Edward Island to Montreal, Montreal to North Carolina, North Carolina back to Prince Edward Island. I wasn't blogging back then. I might have some videos, I'll see. But we did that once. We will not be doing a trip like that again. I would not do that in the EV. However, doing that trip once, every other thing that I do is my daily driving. And for your daily driving, the EV has been fabulous. My car before this was a Subaru Impreza, and doing the best that I could, I got between 8.2 and about 10.5 liters per 100 between summers and winters on different types of driving, and all of that. So that was my comparison for my type of driving. I was having a small hatchback that got between best case scenario 6. It's great on the highway, but I drove in the city a lot. And again, 8 to 10. And my wife's Escape hybrid, an SUV beside me, was getting on average 7 or so would be the worst, 6.5. And that car is now at 1 month since our last fill up. Still has a couple 15% left in the tank. And I'm not sure what the distance is. I'll have to start tracking the distance. Depending on your type of drive, your type of commute, you'll also find that long distances versus short distances should affect your buying decision as well. So your normal daily use case. And out of that normal daily use case, my Ford Mach-E is way oversized for what I need. I typically could have gone with something like a Nissan Versa, Rio, Bolt, if you really wanted to. Could have gone with one of those types of cars. But for my own personal reasons, and this is something that you can't put on a chart, the frunk was a big thing, not a Tesla, big thing. And if you just put those two things, that puts the Ford on the top of the list, maybe the Ioniq 5 and the EV6, but the frunk on the top, that goes to the Mach-E. And let's see, that's the major kicker. Arguably, there could be some better cars, but it all depends on what you want. That being said, I did a short comparison to some cars. I did not put the Mach-E on top of that list because I don't think it matches for what everybody would want for their first EV. The Mach-E was about third in my list. Lower than that at the time was a Subaru Solterra, and we'll be looking at that because the interesting thing is that the new refresh Subaru Solterra is now on par with the Mach-E, save for other weird things like not having a glove box. I wanted a glove box. I'm not giving up a glove box for a radiant heater. You'll also find for somebody who, like me, the heat pump is not important, despite the fact that January to February in Atlantic Canada is quite cold. -10 at is the high, and there's 2 weeks there we're talking about -30 degrees Celsius. And the back car is parked outside, cold soak. So I wanted a PTC resistive heater because I just don't think there's enough heat to scavenge with a heat pump when it's that cold and you really want the car to be warm. I would like to be wrong, and someday I want to do a comparison between the 2025 that has the heat pump and my 2023 that has the resistive heater. So that being said, real world conditions also have a lot to do. So we're going to take a step back and look at what it looks like when you look at the spec sheets and what happens when you actually do some real world comparison of the car that you might actually buy. And we're going to get back to how these car manufacturers are distributing information or making it easy to consume or hard to consume. So we're starting with the Mach-E, and we'll finish with that because that is my frame of reference as the car that I decided to buy as my first EV. When we look at the Ford Mach-E, efficiency on paper is about 6 out of 10, given that on paper it's 26 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. That is roughly 2.7 miles per liters per 100 kilometers equivalent. And we can look at that because in an energy sense, so 1 liter of petrol, 1 liter of gasoline has roughly 9 kilowatt hours of energy. Continue with the Mach-E. Looking at cargo practicality, the frunk makes it score very, very high, even though it has a slightly coupé profile, but a lot of that is just design tricks because the roof line is higher than it is, than it visually appears to be because it is painted in black. It's a very, very sporty car, even if you take the standard range base version that I have because of that rear wheel drive personality of the vehicle. It's very low to the car. It scores weakly on what I would call off-road performance. And that's where you'll see other cars like the Subaru Solterra and the Ioniq 5 do better. Now, long range usability is a combination of, yes, its range on the highway, which is always going to be less than looking at the charging speed, and the overall range between stops gives you a good way to compare the long distance usability. Moving on to what I really wanted to buy when I wanted to just go into an EV, I was moving from a Subaru Impreza. I was waiting for the Solterra. The first version of the Solterra wasn't quite good enough for me to put my money to that manufacturer. And the sheet and the specs that I have shown here are for that first gen. But keep that in mind when you look at the spec sheet for the newer Subaru Solterra, the 2026, that is going to be on sale shortly. So efficiency on the highway scores actually a little bit better on paper than the Mach-E. The cargo practicality, because it has no frunk, is lower. The sporty performance, it's actually pretty quick because it's all-wheel drive and it has decent power, and so the all-wheel drive grip and takeoff from go actually makes it score very well in sporty performance. Doesn't have a high top end, but getting off the line, red light to red light, getting off the line in winter, I'm sure that all-wheel drive Subaru and even the all-wheel drive Mach-E's perform really well in snowy weather. And then it's when it happened, what happened with the last version of the Subaru Solterra, which they have fixed with the 2026 refresh, is the long distance usability. The last Subaru Solterra was quite slow for its DC charging speed, even though it had a decent range, but that slow recharge really affected its DC, its long road trip ability, long distance usability. Now, arguably, moving on to the Hyundai Ioniq 5, this is one of the best um, competitors in this EV small, medium-sized hatchback segment. It scores extremely well in efficiency. It scores very well in cargo practicality. Again, no frunk. It is super performance oriented as well. But looking at the base version, it's less sporty than the base version of the base Mach-E, but it has really good ground clearance, so it's claws back some points in the off-road use performance. And again, it is a long distance beast. High charging speeds, 800-volt architecture. If long distance in an EV is really what you need for your EV, the Hyundai Ioniq 5 and the Chevy Equinox are going to be very, very hard to beat. So looking at those numbers in a little chart and seeing how they stack up amongst each other, you'll find that even though the Ioniq 5 and the Chevy Blazer score the highest, depending if it's efficiency or cargo practicality or the sporty nature or the off-road nature or the long distance usability, these different cars are stronger or weaker in some of these categories. So even though it might not be the top performer, in my case, I went with the Mach-E because it was really good for long distance, decent and long distance usability, and it was not something I'd be doing often. But its cargo practicality is extremely high, and its sporty nature is something that attracted me. Again, cars at low centers of gravities, Subarus, these are EVs. These are the types of cars that I enjoy. The next thing that we're going to talk about when it comes to buying the EV that works for you is, being real about your weather conditions. As much as I would have loved to look at the spec sheets and recognize all these nice efficiency numbers, I was very well aware that I live in Atlantic Canada. See that place on the map? It gets very cold. Even now in May, we've only just had our first day of 20 degrees Celsius. And before this, it's pretty much just been around 12, 13, 10 degrees Celsius. Pretty chilly, 54 degrees Fahrenheit. And of course, during the winter, when it's actually snowing and we have inclement weather, I was aware that these would be my driving conditions as well. And I was very aware of what my long distance road travels would be. So all of those things in mind, knowing that I might take it to Halifax once or twice, I actually did that in the winter, which was a great experience to test the usability of the car. And we're going to talk about this one-stop range and the differences between summer, differences between winter. That one-stop range going between charges is different on high-speed city driving versus puttering around the city. And understanding these cars' strengths and weaknesses will help you make a better decision. So looking at my car, during the winter, you can look, this picture that I took was around after one of my normal trips, -15. Like I said, it was usually -20, quite cold. You'll see this section of the battery used for heating, for driving, for heating the battery and cabin heat. And overall, my average around winter was usually around 26 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. On the high end, it could be 30. But yeah, 25 to 30 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. Now that we're going in the city on my low trips, I'm seeing single digits, 8, 9 on some trips, but I'd rather say that so far, even with our cooler weather, and I'm actually surprised how much of the energy is still required around these mild conditions to heat the battery for that section that is shown as exterior temperature. That's for the battery control, and I think that's because this battery's happy temperature is around 22, 23 degrees Celsius. So even right now that it's May in Atlantic Canada, it's still using energy for heating the battery. That being said, it's still sometimes getting single digit efficiency. Now we're going to actually talk about finding the information for the car you want.